Ancient Earth Stories. Uncovering legends etched in stone.
Have you ever stood before a waterfall and listened not to the water but to the hush behind it? Have you ever felt the spray on your skin cool as moonlight and wondered what secret lies sealed in the silver curtain of falling time? There are places in this world that do not exist on maps, and one of them is hidden among the mountains where clouds nestle like sleeping dragons curled in ancient stone. They say the path to this place cannot be walked, only remembered, like a song your grandmother once hummed in a language that no longer has a name. And in that place, still and veiled in mist, there is a gate, not a gate built by hands but by longing. They call it the Dragon Gate, and beneath it swims a fish with dreams too large for its skin. Long ago, how long, no one can say, there lived a silver-scaled carp in the depths of the Yellow River. It was no ordinary fish, though it looked no different from the thousands that swam beside it, their bodies weaving golden ribbons through the current. But inside this carp pulsed something more than water and breath. It pulsed with a question: why must I be what I have always been? They say the river was born of heaven's tears, and so it carried old truths in its flow, truths that even the mountains forgot to remember. And the carp, born under the hush of willow shadows and raised in the quiet rhythm of eddies and reeds, began to feel the ache of transformation. It would turn its body against the current, seeking not food, not safety, but something it could not name. The elders of the river warned it. They said, "There's a gate upriver. You will never reach it. It is guarded by storms. No carp has ever passed through it." But the carp said nothing. It only turned again into the current, and with each pulse of its tail, it dreamed of wings. It swam through winters so cold the river slept in sheets of silent jade. It swam through summers where the heat cracked the banks like broken porcelain. It dodged nets, evaded claws, danced beneath the moonlight, always forward, always upstream, and then, one dusk, a dusk so still it felt like the world had paused its breath, the carp reached the foot of the waterfall. Here, the river did not flow, it fell. Thunder roared from above, and mist rose in spirals, cloaking everything in a veil of moving silence. There, carved in the stone by no chisel, no storm, no hand, only by time and truth, was the Dragon Gate. Not a gate made of gold or iron, but a hole in the rock where the waterfall split for a breathless instant, and beyond it the sky opened. The carp rested for 3 nights. It let its heart beat against the stone, slow and tired. It let its dreams curl like smoke against the surface. Then it leapt, once, twice, each time the current hurled it back. The river laughed, not cruelly, but with the voice of inevitability. But the carp did not listen. It waited for the moon to rise. It waited until the stars shimmered like scales across the sky, and it leapt again. This time the waterfall parted, just for a breath, just for a blink, and the carp passed through. No one saw it happen, but the wind told the trees, and the trees whispered it to the birds, and the birds carried it across the land. A fish became a dragon. But what is a dragon, truly? They say it grew horns like curling bone and eyes like burning coals. They say its scales shimmered with every sorrow it had ever known. They say it rose into the clouds not as a beast of fire and thunder, but as a memory made sky-born. And from that day on, whenever a storm gathers over the Yellow River, and the wind begins to sing low and deep through the valleys, villagers say, "The dragon remembers." But there is one more part of the story, never told by firelight, only whispered when the river runs low. They say the carp left something behind. Not its body, not its fins, but its name. It lies still in the pool beneath the waterfall, resting in a bed of jade pebbles, a name carved in silence, echoing in ripples. And sometimes, if you stand by the river's edge at dawn, when the light is soft and the birds have not yet woken, you might hear it. Not with your ears, but with the part of you that remembers being something else, a small silver glimmer in a vast dark current, moving always forward, towards something it cannot name. Let us not speak too loudly. The river is still listening, but the mists hold another tale. Have you ever watched smoke rise and felt as if it were writing something in the air? Have you heard the hush that comes when the fire fades low and only embers remain, glowing softly, like forgotten memories? There is an ancient silence hidden in flame, a language without letters, older than any tongue we still remember. They say there was once a woman who could hear the voices inside that silence, not with her ears, but with her bones, and through her the ancestors spoke. Long ago, before the Great Wall snaked its spine across the mountains, before the emperors wore yellow robes, there was a plain of dry wind and ochre dust. There, nestled beside a river that ran thin in summer and wide in spring, sat a village of clay homes and reed roofs. And at the heart of this village was the fire. Not just any fire, but the sacred flame where the oracle worked. She was not called a priestess, nor a sorceress. She had no temple, no scrolls, only a wooden stool, a cracked turtle shell, and a bundle of old bones wrapped in red silk. She was called the Listener. They say her name was lost long ago, but her silence remains. She did not speak often. She did not need to. Her answers were not spoken, but shown, in the splintering of bone, in the curl of smoke, in the way the fire leaned just so. People came from villages far beyond the hills. They brought offerings, millet, dried plum, incense folded in lotus leaves. They came with questions they could not carry alone. Will my wife bear a son? Will the rains come this year? Should I cross the river to trade my rice for salt? And she would nod, place the bone in the flame, and listen. The ox scapula would crack. The turtle shell would hiss. The smoke would rise in coils. As if returning home, then she would look into the flame, eyes wide and still, and say something simple. Yes. No. Not yet. Wait until the next full moon. The people bowed. They did not ask why. Because the oracle's words did not come from her. They came from the ones beneath the earth, from the dust that remembers. From the breath of those long gone, it is said that one day a child came to the fire alone. A girl, no older than 7. She carried nothing in her hands but a single peach blossom and a question folded inside her chest like a bird hiding from thunder. The villagers watched from afar. Some frowned. She is too young, they whispered. The spirits will not answer a child. But the listener took the blossom, placed it beside the fire, and nodded. The girl did not speak, but her eyes, wide and dark as river stones, held a question deeper than seasons or war or crops. She wanted to know, is my mother still near me even though she has died? The listener took a small rib bone from her bundle, one so thin it looked like wind made solid. She placed it gently into the fire. But something happened. The bone did not crack. It glowed. A deep, pulsing light spread through it. Not bright, not hot, but steady. The fire hushed. The smoke stopped rising. Even the wind outside the hut grew still. The listener leaned close, and for the first time tears fell down her cheeks. She whispered, not to the girl, but to the flame, she is here. She has not gone far. And then the bone split. Not loudly, but like silk, tearing under the weight of memory. The glow faded. The smoke rose again, and the fire exhaled. The girl stood quietly, her little hand closing over the air where the blossom had been. She turned and left without a word. But as she walked away, peach petals fell around her, though no tree stood nearby. The listener said nothing to the villagers. She only turned her gaze toward the bones. That night she did not sleep. She placed every bone she had into the fire, one by one, and listened not for the people's questions, but for the questions no one dared to ask. And the ancestors answered. They spoke of years yet to come, of great cities that would rise and fall, of paper and ink and thunder dragons, of emperors who would forget their own names, but mostly they spoke of silence, and of the ones who could still hear it. The next morning the listener was gone. The fire was cold. The hut was empty, but in the ashes someone found the peach blossom. Still fresh, still blooming. They say a new listener was chosen soon after, the girl who had asked the question. She never said much, but when people came with their bones and their prayers, she would place them in the flame and listen. And sometimes, when the fire cracked just so, she would smile. Now, if you ever wander near the Yellow River in springtime and you see peach blossoms drifting where no tree grows, pause. The wind may carry a whisper, not of words, but of knowing, because the fire still speaks. And someone is still listening, and further still, there is one more story. Have you ever looked into a mirror and felt that someone or something was looking back through time? Have you seen your own eyes and wondered, what have they seen that I've forgotten? There are mirrors that do not reflect, but remember. Not just light, but love. Not just form, but longing. This is the story of such a mirror, and of the woman who once held it in trembling hands before stepping beyond the world we know. They call her the Moon Maiden. They call her the Lady of Endless Night. But once, long ago, before her name was sewn into legend, she was simply Chang'e. A woman who loved, a woman who fled, and a woman who watches still. In the time before the emperors wrote their decrees in jade, before the stars were charted and named, there lived an archer named Hao Yi, strong as the sun and silent as stone. He was chosen by heaven to save the world when 10 suns rose into the sky and burned the earth into smoke. One by one, with arrows made of phoenix feather and mountain bone, he brought the suns down, leaving only one to warm the days. The people praised him, but he did not seek their praise. He sought only the quiet presence of his wife, Chang'e. She was not loud, nor radiant, nor born of royalty. She was gentle, and her gentleness was not weakness. It was deep as an ancient lake, quiet as falling snow. She spoke softly, and when she touched the silk of the evening, even the stars leaned closer. One day, the gods, in gratitude, gifted Hou Yi a vial of elixir, clear as wind, thin as light, that granted immortality. But Hou Yi, weary of war and divine fire, chose not to drink it. He hid it in their home, inside a lacquered box inlaid with white pearl. And to Chang'e he said, "Let us live our days slowly. Let us grow old together, and when we return to the stars, we'll go as one." But time is not so gentle. And in a world where power calls to power, word of the elixir spread. One night, while Hou Yi hunted along the western ridges, a shadow crept into their home. A thief, a soldier, a man whose name was later struck from every record. He came to take the elixir. Chang'e, alone and unarmed, stood between him and the box. And in that moment she knew, if he took it, the heavens would crack open again, so she drank it. Every drop, not for herself, but to keep it from the hands of those who would twist eternity into ash. The elixir burned through her veins like cold lightning. She cried out, not from pain, but from leaving. Leaving him, her body grew light. Too light for earth. She rose like mist, like breath, like grief without a voice. And as she rose, she clutched one thing in her hands: the mirror. It had been a wedding gift, forged of river glass and dragon silver. They had used it to watch the moon rise together, year after year, and now it rose with her, glimmering with memory. Up, up, beyond the wind, past the stars, into the quiet where time folds in on itself. She came to rest upon the moon, where silence is not absence but fullness, where no breath disturbs the dust, where no footsteps fall. She built a palace of shadow and pearl. She lit no lanterns, burned no incense. Only the mirror remained. There she waits, not immortal in joy but in distance. Not alone in spirit, but in silence. Sometimes, on the 15th night of the 8th moon, when the air is thick with incense and sweet cakes are left on windowsills, she draws near to the rim of the moon's edge. She peers through the mirror and sees a child laughing in the garden, a man lighting a lantern for his lost wife, a lover waiting beneath a plum tree for someone who will never come. She watches not as a goddess, not as a ghost, but as one who remembers love. They say that one night a poet dreamed of her. He awoke and wrote, "The moon is bright and full tonight. Does she also gaze so far from me?" His words fluttered into the air like moths, and from the moon her palace flickered. But no one knows if she smiled. Now some say the mirror was lost, that it fell from her grasp, tumbling through night until it shattered in a forgotten lake. Others say it remains, polished and clear, resting on a stand carved from meteor stone. And when she peers into it, she does not see herself. She sees the world. She sees you. She sees me, and we feel it, don't we? On those nights when the moon is too full, too close, too quiet, we feel her gaze. Not cold, but longing, a longing so deep it becomes light, a light so old it becomes song. A song we no longer know how to sing, but still we try. Every time we lift our eyes and whisper, "Chang'e, do you remember?" She does, and she waits, but listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever watched the stars and wondered who first gave them names? Not in books, not in charts, but in whispers. Soft syllables breathed into night like ink dropped into water. Have you traced the shape of a constellation with your finger, feeling as though someone long ago had drawn it there just for you? There was once a man who did not believe that the sky was empty. He saw it not as space, but as scroll. Not as vast, but as sacred. They say he lived in a tower carved into the spine of a mountain, so high that the mist curled through his window like incense smoke from the earth below. Each morning he awoke before the sun, and before he even opened his eyes he would hear the hush that comes before creation, the hush that waits for the first word. His name was Yuen, not a sage, not a scholar, though both called him so. He was simply a scribe who had never learned to stop listening. In his chamber there were no mirrors, no chairs, no worldly ornaments, only scrolls, rolled, unfurled, half-finished, and a single brush. It was said the brush was made from the hair of a tLeends tail, and its handle carved from the wood of a tree that had never flowered. But Yuen never spoke of its making. He only said, "The ink must breathe," for his ink was not made with soot or oil, but of stranger things: the crushed berries of ghost mulberry trees, the ash of fallen meteors ground to powder, the breath of a child's first dream, caught in his silk sachet. Each night he dipped the brush and wrote, not on parchment and but into the sky. His strokes were invisible to the eye, but not to the heart. He wrote the sorrow of widows into the shape of Orion's shoulder. He wrote the laughter of unborn children into the tail of the great dragon. He traced the curve of the Milky Way from the memory of a single kiss, one that never reached its beloved. Villagers at the base of the mountain would look up at the stars and weep, without knowing why. Some felt joy. Others felt the weight of something half-forgotten stir in their chests. But none knew of Yuen. They only said, "The sky feels full tonight." Yet not all were moved to reverence. In the great cities far below, where the palaces rose and the coins clinked like restless spirits, there came rumors that the stars had shifted, that the heavens no longer obeyed the court astrologers. The emperor, proud and wary, summoned his guards. "Find this scribe," he commanded. "Tell him to cease. The heavens are not his to draw upon." And so they came, with torches and spears, their boots pounding the mountain stone like thunder. But when they reached the tower, they found it open, empty. The scrolls were gone, the inkpot dry. Only the brush remained, resting on a slab of moonstone, and behind it, the wall. On it, drawn in strokes finer than breath, a single line of writing. Words are not owned. They are remembered. The soldiers returned empty-handed. The emperor, furious, ordered the tower sealed. No one would write upon the sky again. But that night, the stars shimmered more brightly than ever before. And somewhere in a dream, a child whispered to their mother, "Look, the sky is writing something. They say Yuen was never seen again." Some believe he became a star himself, a dot of ink lost among the patterns. Others say he still writes, in places no one can reach, behind clouds, beneath eclipses, inside comets that streak across the sky in silence. And even now, when you stand alone beneath the heavens and feel something stir behind your ribs, a sorrow you cannot name, a joy you cannot claim, and know this, the ink is still wet. The sky is still telling stories, and you are part of the handwriting, and in the valley below a silence even older remains. Have you ever stood before a stone and felt it hum? Not the hard clang of rock struck by hammer, but a soft, deep song rising from within, like a heartbeat buried beneath centuries of silence. There is a place far beyond the reach of roads, deep in the Kunlun Mountains, where one stone sings in the hours just before dawn. Only those with grief wrapped tight around their souls can hear it. Long ago, in a village folded into the valley's green cradle, there lived a boy named Liang. He was no different from the other children, save for a sorrow that seemed too large for his young heart. His mother, gentle as river reeds, had been taken by the river's swift current one spring morning, swallowed without warning, without goodbye. The villagers mourned with quiet eyes, but for Liang, the world had cracked open. He would wander to the river's edge every day, his small hands trailing in the cold water, whispering her name into the wind. "Mother," he called, though the river only echoed back silence. He begged the water, pleaded with the stones, prayed to the sky, but the river gave nothing but its endless song. One night, beneath a sky thick with stars, Liang sat alone by a large stone at the mountain's base. It was smooth and dark, mottled with veins of quartz that caught the moonlight like veins of silver. He pressed his ear against the cold surface, and for the first time he heard it, a hum, low and steady, as if the stone held a secret too heavy for words. Moved by something he could not name, Liang lay down beside the stone and slept. He dreamed of the river's currents turning into wings, of his mother's laughter rising like mist from the water. And when dawn crept softly over the peaks, he awoke to find the stone glowing faintly in the first light. The villagers, curious and cautious, came to see the glowing stone. Old Ma Li, the village elder, whispered, "It is a sign." The mountain remembers. From that day forward, the stone sang. Not always loud, but always there. A lullaby for the lost, a hymn for the broken-hearted. Liang learned to listen. He found that when he sat close, the hum would rise and fall like breath. And sometimes, in the deepest moments of grief, the stone would sing in words only he could understand. songs of love and loss, of sorrow and hope, woven into the fabric of the earth itself. As the years passed, the boy grew, but he never left the stone. He carved a small altar nearby, left offerings of jasmine and wildflowers. And when he spoke to the villagers, he spoke of the stone's song, not as sadness, but as something holy. They say sorrow weighs heavy, he would say, but here it becomes light. It sings and turns into something else. Something that lives beyond pain. Pilgrims began to travel from faraway places. They came with hearts too full, with silence too loud, seeking the stone that sang. And when they heard it, soft and steady like a prayer, they wept, not for what was lost, but for what might yet be found. The stone remains there, still, nestled beneath the peaks where the air tastes of cold breath and ancient secrets. If you go in the hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath, you may hear the song too. What song would your sorrow sing if you listened closely enough? Would it be a lament, a call, or a promise whispered on the wind? The mountain waits, the stone listens, and the dawn comes, but the wind carries one more story still. Have you ever watched a single flame dance against the night, flickering with stories only the dark can hear? Have you held a lantern close and felt its light stretch beyond the glass, beyond your hands, reaching into the unseen? There was once a village, lost now to time and map, where a lantern maker lived. They say his lanterns could guide the dead across rivers no living eye could see, bridges of shadow and silence. The village lay cradled in a valley where the mist hung thick as a whispered prayer. Its houses were woven from bamboo and clay, their roofs curved like the wings of sleeping birds. Each year, during the Ghost Festival, the lantern maker would craft a single red lantern unlike any other. A lantern that did not float away with the wind, but rose, steadily and silently, toward the stars. He carved the frame from wood grown at the edge of an ancient burial ground, a place where the earth's sorrow seeped into roots and stone. He painted its surface with vermilion lacquer, the color of life and blood and fire. But the flame he kindled within was no ordinary fire. It was said to come from his own breath, the last warmth of a soul who understood the border between worlds. Every year, the villagers would watch the lantern rise. They would say prayers, whisper names, and hold their breath as it climbed higher until it disappeared beyond the clouds. But one year, something changed. The lantern did not rise. It trembled, flickered, then cracked open like a flower wilting in the dark. Wax wept down its side, pooling like tears on the riverbank. The village was hushed. The lantern maker's hands trembled, though he said nothing. That night, as the village slept beneath a moon swollen with grief, someone knocked at his door. A visitor silent as shadow. No one had seen him approach. He was said to have not drawn breath for 1,000 years. His eyes were hollow pools, his cloak woven from the threads of forgotten dreams. The lantern maker did not flinch. He lit a candle and opened the door. The visitor stepped inside, the air growing colder with each step. He spoke no words, but held out a small, ancient box carved from jade, inside a flame, faint, flickering, eternal. The visitor touched the lantern, and the cracked wax began to melt, healing like a wound in time. The flame inside the lantern grew steady again, glowing with a light that was neither fire nor spirit, but something older, something deep. And then the visitor was gone, leaving behind only silence and a faint scent of sandalwood. The lantern maker lit the lantern once more. This time it rose, not toward the stars, but upward and outward across the village and beyond, lighting the paths of those who had no voices left. They say its glow could reach the darkest corners, the loneliest shadows. It guided the dead across unseen bridges, and the living toward forgotten memories. The villagers whispered that the lantern's flame was the last breath of the Maker, a gift given freely without fear or regret. And when the festival ended and the lanterns were no more, the light remained, a soft pulse beneath the earth, a heartbeat in the silence. If you find yourself walking a quiet path on a night thick with mist, look for that faint glow. It may be a lantern, or it may be the breath of those who came before lighting the way home. Do you see it now, flickering behind your closed eyes? A single flame rising against the darkness. A last gift from one who understood the language of light and shadow.